Hello, and today we're going to talk about this machine here. This is what I call my fast DOS computer because I use it for later DOS games, stuff from late 90s, Doom, Duke Nukem 3D, a lot of the more intense first-person shooter type games. Ignore the dogs in the background. Whenever I try to lock them out, they just scratch at the door and freak out from separation anxiety. But I got this at a flea market maybe 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a little bit more. And I think I paid like $5 for it. Took it home, opened up. At the time, I didn't really have a lot of DOS experience. My first computers in the 90s, I had a Commodore 64 and then my dad's Amiga. So I didn't get into the whole PC thing until probably like 96 when I got my own first PC. And by then it was a Windows 95 machine. I had a little bit of experience before that. I had friends that had later Tandies with DOS on them, and we played games, like Dexter and some of the later Space Quest. So I had a little bit of experience with it, but not a lot. So DOS was kind of a really scary thing for me at first, a lot of all the command line interfaces and things. But this is actually the first computer that I figured out DOS on. I took it home, optimized it a little bit. It stuck with me through the years as kind of like my mainstay DOS machine. After this I built a 486, which I'll eventually show, that I do a lot of my older early 90s gaming on, but I do a lot on this one still. It's a good all-around machine. When I first got it, it had I think it was a K6 2 at 500 megahertz. I've replaced it with a Pentium. We'll get into that. What I have installed, I have of course the 1.44 megabyte floppy drive. I have a CD-ROM drive. I also have a 5.25 inch floppy. Doesn't really see a whole lot of use actually. And then I have a zip drive, IDE zip drive. I always try to put a zip drive in my machines. I find it really convenient to transfer files. On my Windows 7, my main machine, I have a USB zip drive, and zip drives will work with anything back to an original 5150 IBM as long as you have an NEC20 upgrade chip in it. So it's just really versatile. I just find it quicker than burning CDs. A lot of people I know to transfer files, they'll just burn it on a CDs. I just find this a lot less wasteful, quicker. It works just fine. Other people I know set up networks. I don't even want to play around with networks through DOS and ancient stuff, so zip drive works for me. Let's take a look at the back. Okay, here we have the back of the machine. Pretty standard, 2 PS2 ports for keyboard and mouse. I have USB, which doesn't work because I don't have DOS drivers for them. I think there's drivers that will make them work in DOS, but I've never messed around with it. Parallel port, 2 serial ports. There's no built-in onboard video or sound on this motherboard, which is good, which I like. If we go down, we can see there's a little exhaust port for a PCI slot fan I added. Under that we have a SCSI card, the video card, and you could probably guess from that connection it's not really hooked up properly right now, but I do have a Voodoo. And under that I have a sound card. So let's open it up and I'll show you what's inside it. Alright, hope you can see the lighting's well enough. The motherboard I have in here, I was kind of lucky when I picked this thing up. It's a FIC PA 2013, I believe, which is a pretty good motherboard. It has 1 megabyte on board of L2 cache, which is really cool. A lot of boards at the time had 512 kilobytes. Some of them had a lot like Coast modules, and usually those only had like 256 kilobytes. But yeah, this one has 1 megabyte. I think there's some models that have 2 megabytes. I'm not 100% sure on that. I know it's a bit of a mess with the wires. RAM, it uses SD RAM. I think 133, PC 133. I have 128 put in. That's massive overkill for DOS, but I figured it was my fast machine, so may as well kind of go all out. It has 2 not floppy drives. It has 2 hard drives right there. You can see one of them's IDE. This one's IDE, and this one's SCSI. At one point in time, I kind of went SCSI crazy, and I just started putting SCSI drives in everything. And usually they already had IDE drives in them, and I didn't feel like putting in the operating system. So usually, you know, I have the operating system on the IDE drive, and then I'll put the games on the SCSI drives because it's a little bit faster. Also, there's a lot of limits. I have DOS 6.22 installed, and I believe it only sees 528 megabytes. I might be wrong on that for the IDE drive, but with the SCSI drive, I can see full 2 gigabytes, although I think this is like a 8 gigabyte drive, but I'm only seeing 2 gigabytes. I could make a bunch of partitions, 2 gigabyte partitions, but I don't think I bothered with this machine. And then we have the different cards down here, which I will go into. Here's the PCI fan. Here's my SCSI card. It's an Adaptec SCSI card. And let me unscrew these and pull these out so you can see them. All right, so let's go through these cards. First off, I'm going to disconnect the sound card and the SCSI. Put that one out. So here's my SCSI card. It's an Adaptec. Looks like it's a AHA 2940 UW. I think I picked this up at probably Goodwill for probably $3 or $4. I used to find these all the time. A lot of times boxed. I haven't found one in a little while now. But, you know, SCSI. And for a video card, I'm actually using an S3 Verge. This is a Verge GX. And the Verge kind of gets a bad rap as a very slow 3D accelerator card, and it is. But I think it works well for this machine. The card I used to have installed was a Trio V64 Plus, I think, which is not the fastest card for DOS, but it's pretty fast. It does the job, but it has excellent compatibility. I believe that is the card that DOSBox is based off of. It's like its default is based off the Trio. And the Verge cards use the same 2D core, and since this is, you know, 95% of the games I'm probably going to play on this are really 2D games. So I get to keep that excellent 2D core, although I need to do a little bit more investigating because I have found some weird things. It seems like a couple games, I did some benchmarking, and it seems like the Trio was like 1 or 2 frames faster than this. And also, Daggerfall, I played about half of that game with the Trio, and then I switched over to this, and some of the textures in some of the diagonal, in some of the diagonal corridors on the floor were very strange and stretched. It could have been a fluke, I don't know. Supposedly it's the exact same 2D core, but this is the GX. This is one of the faster Verge cards. There's the GX2 is faster than this. But I didn't go with that because it does have some compatibility problems with a couple games. I mean, the 3D acceleration may come in handy. I might play something like Terminal Velocity on this machine. I believe there's a DOS version. So, and not only is there a DOS version, there's an S3D version, which specifically is for the Verge card. So, I mean, it could come in handy there. So that's the 3D accelerator card. Then I have, this is the Voodoo card. This is a Voodoo 1 card. I went with the Voodoo 1, yes, the 4 megabyte Diamond Voodoo 1 card. I went with this card over the Voodoo 2 simply for compatibility. I have Voodoo 2 SLI set up in my Windows 95 computer, which is good for me, so I just wanted to have the Voodoo 1 in the DOS computer. The Voodoo 2, I mean, if you use patches and special batch files and stuff, I think all but like 2 games. Terminal Reality, I think, is one of them. And I think some other racing game. Those are like the only 2 games that will not work on a Voodoo 2. So, I mean, really you should go with a Voodoo 2 just because you'll get like faster frame rates and things like that, but I wanted 100% compatibility with kind of the early games that use Glide and the Voodoo 1 card, so I went with the Voodoo 1. So, and the CPU in this, I guess I kind of skipped on that. You can kind of see it hidden in here. I'm using a 200 megahertz Pentium 1. I kind of agonized over my choice for a little while with this machine. I I could have went with like a Pentium 133, which would have been kind of more classic. You kind of want to go for a slower CPU with these DOS machines, but I felt 200 megahertz was kind of a good balance, since I kind of made this decision based on that I had a Windows 95 machine that had a Pentium 2 in it, 450 megahertz Pentium 2. So that would cover, like, you know, the really faster games. And then I have a 486. I have several 486s. So I kind of thought the 200 megahertz was kind of a good middle ground for this machine. And it's worked out fine for me. So lastly, we have kind of the coolest part is the audio card. And I had a lot of choices. What I went with, I think this is an AW. It should be an AWE, an AW32, CT3990. I kind of want a different card, to be honest. This one doesn't have a real FM OPL chip on it from Yamaha. But then again, like I said, I have a 486 that I do a lot of my earlier gaming on. So if I really want to play a game with the real FM, I just use one of my earlier computers. I won't use this one. And this is kind of a cool card. It does MIDI. It does like, it emulates the FM sound. I originally had a Sound Blaster in here, but I started running into the hanging MIDI bug a lot, and it still happens on this card, but not quite as much. Although I really would eventually like to get one with the chip on it, the real OPL chip. And the other cool thing is it has the wavetable header, and this card on it is the it's an NEC XR385, which is a clone of Yamaha's MIDI daughter board, which was kind of the rival to General MIDI. These used to be really easy to find on eBay, maybe like 2 years ago. I think there was a guy in China, I guess he had a warehouse stock they were selling for like 25 to 30 bucks. Apparently his source dried up, and you can't find these quite as easy anymore. I think the price on them probably like tripled, maybe quadrupled since then, which sucks, because I would have really liked to got two of them in case something ever happens to this card. But it does MIDI tunes. I think it's General MIDI compatible. A couple games I really like this thing. I think it sounds better than the Roland General MIDI standard. It's kind of its own standard, but it's compatible. Like Doom, I really like the soundtrack of Doom with this. I like it a little bit better than with Roland's version of General MIDI. I think it sounds a little bit better, a little bit more aggressive. So, but that's cool. Yeah, you want one with the wavetable header so you can add these cards. The AWE32, it does its own kind of General MIDI emulation, and it's okay, but it's not nearly as good as this thing. So, and then there's a look in there without any of the cards. As you can see, you want your ISA slots for DOS, if you know, for sound cards. Got some PCI, got the AGP slot, which I'm not using. So let's take a look at a couple games on this thing.
Damn, those alien bastards are gonna pay for shooting up my ride.
Hold! 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 Hold!
Attention all competitors. This is your 1-minute warning. I repeat, 1 minute to race commencement. Members of the public, you now have 1
5, 4, 3,